Over the last couple of weeks, you've been in multiple discussions with other people, and it's been my honor to film it, but it's renewed a lot of my intrigue and inspiration into your works. Obviously, I've seen them over the years since I was a little one, but a lot of the pieces that I didn't necessarily understand before, I've got a renewed respect and admiration for. And
that's very kind.
And something I thought about is that since I was little, I've always noticed specific themes that recur, that you return to over the years. And I think some of them, when I was very young, were easier to understand and others not so much. But I've always enjoyed exploring each of those themes, which is why today I'd like to discuss some of them with you and just maybe revisit some of them, maybe get a better understanding of some of the reasonings behind the themes, what you were trying to achieve. So
let's try.
Let's try. So as a starting point, a couple of years ago, you did a crab series, and you told me where the inspiration came from.
Yeah, it was one of your drawings, and I think you were very young at that time. You think you were older, I think you were younger.
I think I was 4 or 5, wasn't it?
I think 4.
You think 4, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah. So what I'd like to know is what made you think that that combination needed a series of the crab with the heart and the kite?
We live in a world of objects, and we're all moving all the time. So it's objects and movement. And you've got that in that little drawing. My inspiration is energy, to see it manifested on this plane where we live. And I couldn't help being struck by your drawing because it has energy in it, but also the metaphor in it of these 3 layers of things happening. Let's look at that drawing. I've got it here for you because I thought you must see it, but you'll have to be very careful when you photograph this one. You remember this one?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
This is the second or the first one of 2 that you made. I can't find the other one yet. So I took this and I started with little sketches. You will remember them. And I thought it was lovely the way I remember in some of the drawings I did. I used to love this little feet of the crab running from the water, from the sea. And there its mighty arms hold up this huge heart. And then from the heart, I had to choose. Do I take a long string or a short one? I can show the short one, or I could make a huge, tall kite. Well, I tried them all, more or less. That's how it happened to me. I said, try different ones and see which you like most. That's usually how it works. Okay, so, die krappie, jy sien hom nie so duidelik, maar kyk sy sterk arms. Maar die hart is nog groter as wat hy kan hou, maar hy hou hulle. En sy pragtige oogies, wat net soos beentjies vreeslik lewendig is. En dan die kite. En dit was voortdurend 'n besluit. Is the heart bigger or is the kite bigger? You may remember in later life I tried them all. It took years before I did it, but I did.
That's lovely.
It stayed in the drawer for a long time. That's why you still have it today.
Yeah. I remember you also once telling me that to you, to a certain degree, the crab was being earthed, it was being grounded, you know, the 3 elements. And that the heart is the love you give and the love you take from the world. And then you said to me once that the kite to you then symbolizes connection to something higher.
The sky's the limit, and that's usually love, the biggest thing.
Yeah. Now that's always been very special to me, that you reimagined them in such an amazing way, because I really do remember them so well as a child. There was a patch where I was so obsessed with, I drew it everywhere, on everything. So it's always been special. Yeah.
Thank you for drawing it, because I just didn't have to add much. I just adjusted and played around and loved it.
Good. Something I wanted us to discuss is that throughout all of the series, be it your flight, be it germination, be it horses, there's a unifying theme of tension and deconstruction and balance. throughout all of those themes, what is it that's similar between horses and flight and germination, and what is actually the difference between them?
Well, you use the word deconstruction. Well, you know, deconstruction, I didn't leave it there. I used it to reconstruct. And in the process, the reconstruction revealed things that I never expected. It reveals the important place in all abstract work about tension, balance, and in between all the relationships, interrelationships, and, as I've said before, interdependence. And from that really links everything. It comes through in everything, because most things are really, they combine nature and abstraction, but in that sense they're totally abstract. And that is the link.
Throughout all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. It's for you to judge, but I think so.
But I think so, yeah. But you know, even if I think of, sorry, I'm deviating a little bit, but you know, even if I think about your Alpha series, even I know we're not going to look at it specifically today, but that for me also embodies that essence that you mentioned now, the deconstruction and the tension, but that tension that creates balance. Yeah. And for me, that's the most direct representation of that tension and balance. But then, like you say, throughout all of them, it's different. It's almost like different frequencies of that tension and balance in all of these different series. Or is that sort of
quite so? Now, you know, a picture without tension is a dead picture for me. So if you get used to looking for tension, which is life after all, life without tension is death. And a picture without life is a sad story for me.
Yeah. Well, I should hope so. Yeah.
So you will always find it somewhere. But it is something that you've got to be alert to see it all the time. But once you're used to it, you cannot do anything without it, because it disturbs you so much if you do it that you immediately change it. And it has to do with these balances of what used to be space, and now what I'm doing is less space because it's moving in and out. And it's not a dead background anymore. Everything now is interconnected, and that interconnection makes for tension. You know, the picture frame is your start. I mean, it's your universe. It's as far as your influence goes. So distance from everything to everything else has a place, has an importance. Awareness.
You know, if I think about some of the pieces that are fuller within the frame, that makes sense. It's a heavier image than a lot of your flight works. There's a lot of negative space around the movement of the flight, you know. From the edge of the paper, there's quite a lot of space first. And I see what you mean. That's important, because never mind just the work itself and how it relates to the edge of the paper.
And you find it in the bodies too, which I don't think you're going to discuss today. There's not time.
Not time, yeah.
But that is a very difficult and a very, for me, very important theme. Because it combines everything.
So when it comes to a series like your flight, your horses and your germination, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've seen over the years that you revisit them. Now,
all the time.
Yeah. But what happens that makes you think I want to revisit germination? Or is it a sort of a natural progression? Is it something that just happens innately?
I think it's natural. Sometimes the one picture... Usually the one picture suggests the next one already. So you go on. So that's why you eventually end up with a series, because you see something else, you stress it, or you want to improve on it, and you go on. The other reason is, if it's over a longer period, then we all hopefully change, because life changes us. And as we change, we become aware of different things. And that same theme lends itself to that. Like in flight, I started off, it was a predestined flight. No choice, predestined. I started with that, but later on, I did another predestined drawing. Depends on how you react at the moment. Is you feel it's already planned, or in flight. The first ones of the secateurs, the pruning scissors, was about fleeing, getting away. Get away from tensions, get away from life tensions, get away from things that keep you busy or whatever. And then it changed through various phases. And eventually it became just the glory of flying.
Yeah.
So it changes as we change. Then we see different things and we stress different things, and that's the goodness of being alive.
So when it comes to flight, for example, you know how you say, okay, of course you started with secateurs. Is that the one that we all know from Omar's house?
That's
Is
the
it
one.
the 1970s secateurs?
That's the joy one.
You know, that one, it's so funny. With secateurs, having it hang in the dining room when we were children, we used to sit and stare at it all the time.
I wish you had told me.
Yeah, well, I guess we were too young to know that we should, you know. And I know that my sister and I specifically always had debates about what it is. No, it's a bird. No, it's a moth. No, but don't you understand why it's a moth? Because look at the colouring and look at its big eye.
I
It's a
like
moth,
that.
you know.
Yeah, I like
and
that.
Then I think we were quite a bit older, but maybe, when I say older, maybe 12 or something. And you said, no, it's secateurs. Now, neither of us knew what the word secateurs meant. And you explained, no, it's shears, but it's also a bird. And I remember my sister saying, I told you it was a bird. I'm like, well, it could also just be flying in general. But you know, the fact that...
Yeah, the beauty that is a moth, why not?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and but I mean, going from something like the secateurs, there's a specific look that I said to you earlier as well. You know, when I see those sort of colours, it makes me think of your work from the 70s. There's a sort of a theme that you followed colour-wise, not through everything, but when I see works in those colours, like the colours of the secateurs, maybe it's just an association I make.
Yeah.
But from secateurs through to your more recent, in the early 2000s to late 2000s flight, there's a major change in colour and style. And I mean, the ones in the 2000s are mostly blues and black and maybe a little bit of a red here and there, but lots of white.
You see how life changes?
Yeah.
Changes us.
Yeah.
When you look at the flight series, you will see such a difference from the first ones of the 70s and the ones of the 20s.
Yeah.
Oh my, it's big. It's from
completely different,
71 to 2020.
So you return to the theme of flight over 3 decades. 3 decades, yeah.
Okay, you work it out.
Yeah,
Yes?
I'm just trying to do the maths, but it's fine. Over 3 decades, you know, you consistently, 4 decades, consistently return to flight in different stages in your life, and so you can see how the approach has changed.
And it reflects to everybody, because we all do.
Yeah. But I just wonder what makes you feel one day I need to do some more flight images. You know what I mean? That there would be gaps in between, a couple of years of gaps in between, and then you revisit flight.
Haven't I said I had changed in between?
Yes.
I
But
think.
what I'm wondering is, how do you go back to flight? Is it just because it's a theme and a concept that you know embodies a lot of that change? So that's why you would revisit it?
Yeah, because it also does a lot of things. It soars, it goes, and it descends, and it glides. It does various things that we can associate with.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, if that answers your question.
It does, it does. That's why you would revisit a theme like that, because it can tell so many parts of the story.
Well, swimmers can also give that feeling of gliding through the water, but there's more physical action there.
Yeah.
I did do swimmers some time ago. It's a very nice theme, but I have nothing left.
Oh, all gone.
I don't know where they went.
many creators
Yeah.
will visit portraits because it is often self-reflection and reflecting on other people, of course. But, you know, across many genres, different styles, people visit portraits as a theme. Now, you've done a number of portraits spanning many decades. You did a specific series on portraits, when was it, 2009?
Yeah, it was around there.
Yeah, you had the gallery opening at
That was at SMAC,
yeah.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to portraits, what is it that draws either yourself or maybe just in general that people are drawn to doing portraits?
You know, I think in a way, painters all paint their own portraits. Why? Because who will pose for me? I'll do it myself. I look in the mirror.
Yeah.
So invariably, you draw yourself. You draw yourself. And other times, you may have another model, but something of yourself sort of creeps into it, perhaps. I don't know. But in a way, so I think we're all, in a way, drawing our own portraits. And sometimes we associate very much with what we draw. So it's very possible, if that replies to your question.
But also trying to understand the inner self before you can understand outside.
Ah, and that one, I'll tell you, that whole series at SMAC was on duality. Because you've got a heart and you've got a mind, and these two sit in the same house, but they don't necessarily communicate.
No.
And they start looking at one another like foreigners, but they become one face.
I remember that,
So
actually.
you remember that one?
Yeah. Multiples of those
yeah.
pieces had the
And-
physical divide.
And mostly people paint portraits, emotional portraits. I painted emotional portraits too. They have a place. We all recognize it and we know it and we feel it and so forth. But, you know, somehow the universal also always comes into what appeals to me. What is general to everybody. And this duality is in everybody. Some of us are more aware of it, some are not aware of it at all. Doesn't matter, it's there. And that's why I had these double-faced, one-faced people.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that very well, yeah. So through tension, deconstruction, and balance, there's predominantly two types of movement as far as I can see. And that's your more active movement and your passive movement. So your active movement is your horses, your flight. It's very energetic and it's very tactile in that sense.
Yeah.
But then there's, just as importantly, slow movement.
You get it in the human body. You sit there, but it's full of movement, pressures, extensions, and you get it in plant life all around us all the time.
So let's just first revisit the fact that germination here, you say it's one of the first germinations, and you were telling me who named it for you and what it was named and so on and so
Yeah,
forth.
that was right. It was our big friend Barry Hough. And you know, Barry had that fantastic sense of humor, and he used to often name pictures for me. And this one he named Embryo Listening.
I think that's perfect.
And that moved me greatly.
yeah. That's beautiful, yeah.
Yeah.
And you say other people have named multiple works of yours in the past as well.
That's right. I remember with the portraits, Nadine came over to help me name 4 of them.
Nadine Gordimer.
That's right. And I did use those names because I thought they were apt. But there were other portraits that came later, and they were faceless portraits, really, of the seated Sallies. You may remember that.
No, I
That's
remember the
another
Sallies,
series,
of course, yes.
Yeah, there are so many series.
Now, with this germination being 2000, so it's 20 years ago, it doesn't feel like 20 years ago, but it is. You say this is almost the starting point of where you started with germination, but you've got a couple here for us to take a look at. I'm assuming to look at the progression of germination.
There is something maybe. I remember when my first interest in this shape came. You know, I can draw it for you quickly if I...
Yeah.
It's something like...
Yes, I know that shape
You know,
well. Yeah.
I saw that. I was looking for something in one of the 10 or 12 LaRouche volumes on my shelf for something else. And I happened to come across this, and I stuck to it, and it stayed with me. And that had an influence on the bodies and on the germinations. But when that was, I don't remember the date. But this, being so reminiscent of the heart, became a heart, this, if I turn it around in the body, and this way the germinating plant. So when I saw that first, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But any image, anything acts like as I said before, like a pig on the wall, and on that you hang ideas and feelings and whatever you're busy with.
Yeah.
Have you seen that one?
Yes, I've seen it. As soon as you draw the shape, I know it immediately. I know that shape well. I've seen it. I mean, it's here as well.
Yeah.
You see here.
That's right.
That shape is already there. But this one is a bit more, so this is 2012, 12 years later.
This is a shorthand for growth.
Yeah. But it's also partial lotus, is it not?
Yes.
So it almost bridges your flower germination, but those two have always sort of...
I'm glad you see
crossed
something
boundaries.
like that.
Yeah, of course.
You see there's the shape. Huh?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. When you move to this one, it makes me think again of you saying where you leave space from the border of the paper. You immediately, this is much heavier in a way, but it still has a lightness and still has an energy to it, but there's less space, between the edges here and the edges of the paper.
Yeah, but it just filters in.
Yeah.
And then, to a listen, sometimes to a greater extent, sometimes to a lesser extent.
Yeah. So this movement here towards, I mean, like I say, you can see the lotus at the top.
I liked the junction of the two.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely.
And then it's seated on its own leaf sort of thing.
Yeah, Like it has its own little origin bulb.
And
that
you
it's
see, you
directly
have
connected to.
You have to think of, I mean, it happens in any picture. I mean, it's not only in my pictures, but look at the size of this compared to this, which is more alive than that which is smaller and quieter. I mean, that's the way pictures work.
And even in that, then you've got the tension sort of horizontally as well as vertically.
Yeah. The more the better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up. And I like the diagonal. Use it a lot in the bodies.
And you were saying with the germination, there's always a central line, like the stem of it, which creates this sort of sturdiness in the image, even when there is a lot going on.
It's so nice. It's what nature gives you. It's growth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you can see that here, even with the slightly more squat version, there is still that line is still there. The stem is still there. It's created here sort of by the negative here through to that almost a direct bit of stem.
Yeah, it's hopping.
Yeah. Now, when we look at this one, for example, so this is now obviously a diagonal. When it comes to that sort of not passive movement, the patient movement.
That happens often.
Yeah.
So the vertical has become diagonal because it's there, it follows through. Otherwise, it wouldn't grow along the same route.
But at the same time, flowers often do that because they need to grow sideways to get the light they need. They don't always need to go straight up.
Yeah, they do it more than the body can't do it all that. Although it can stretch a lot.
Yeah.
And I like it when it stretches.
So a piece like this, what is the body and the plant telling us in this piece? Because you always tell us that the germination, in a way, it is a body in itself, whether it's a human body or a plant body. What is this body telling us?
I would say I am hoping that it will tell you something about a slow progression. And it is not only in plant life, but in human existence. It applies on many levels. And that sort of holds my attention. You see, the difference is here, it's very much sort of, not, yeah, there is brushwork here, but then later on there's less and less, like in the one you saw before.
And here you've got a bit of almost colour blocking. This technique, well, not technique, but it's a style that I also see across multiple series.
Yeah, that is more filled in space. Here Here it's more opening up, and there it's completely opening up.
Oh, and that's actually something I want to mention, is this the technique of the paper placements. So,
well, they're going to be painted.
At some point, yeah. But also, again, from when we were little, I remember all of these perfectly little placed pieces of paper and having to often ask you to explain to me why they are there.
Otherwise, you'd have to paint it, and if you don't like it, you repaint.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense as a technique or as a method.
I like to keep it sort of clear. What I find clear.
Yeah. So a lot of these would have been coloured paper to place.
It could have been, yes.
I imagine so,
yeah.
Yeah. Well,
you don't know which and which. I don't remember which and which.
No,
some.
No.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this one I can't move too much further. We run out of space. So this piece, like I said, there you've got your method with the paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes sense, because if you were to commit to putting those white blocks there without being able to visualize it literally first.
Man, I learned this many, many, many years ago. Too long to tell you.
Too long to tell. Yeah.
And you look until you find the right paper, or you paint the right paper.
Yeah, yeah. If you've got all of this, the silent, the patient, the quiet movement through germination, and your flower series to a degree as well.
Yeah.
And I guess your bodies, because the germination and the bodies are so interlinked. There's also a very different kind of energy and movement that you see in horses, that you see in flight. And then, like you said, you had your swimmer series as well. I think to a degree, even the musicians, there's a very tactile, active energy, specifically looking at your flight and your horses, for example.
Oh, yes.
The type of energy that you see in those compared to the energy you see in germination. Yes, they have things in common. It's that tension, the balance. But it's a very different energy that you get from those.
Yes, the relationships are as important here, but it's pushed to a greater extent in some other pieces, perhaps. And I like it when it's pushed. I like things to really go to as far as you can. Let me show you quickly the one where full growth, full tension, and decay is shown in one picture. That was a challenge, and I like challenges.
With flight and horses, and you say that yes, there is that similarity in the energy, but when it comes to this very, very active energy that you find in your flight and your horses, how does that differ from your patient energy of germination?
I think the one is more broken. It goes in stages, in steps. And that is, by the way, what the early Cubists did too when they wanted to show movement. They showed it in repetition of... I also made lots of bottles with that kind of repetition.
So that kind of slow, steady repetition would be more your germination, but then if you look at your horses and your flight...
You see, eventually, the flight is gliding, it's slow, it's a slow movement, and the horses is usually fast, or they're ready to go. So there's that kind of tension, or I find that the straight line gives you the feeling of speed, which it does, because from there to there is the quickest is a straight line. So it shows you the rhythm. Sorry, we haven't got those horses.
We've got some. We'll look at them, see if we can...
No, we haven't got those, but we can look at one of them.
Yeah, we'll look at some horses, yeah. So Nell, I think let's take a little walk around the studio so we can look at some of the other themes.
If you still got energy.
I do. Do you have energy?
With you I must have energy.
Yeah, I'm forced
keep up with you.
Force you.
This is to show transparency and lightness of being. I hope it does.
Now when it comes to the active energy of this kind of image, can you show me where the tension in this image is?
I think it is here and there and going forward. And that is the lightness going up, and he's also going up. You know, we've been talking about abstraction, and that is removing the flesh from the energy and just trying to show the energy. And these little bits of color are important to me because they, in direction, they follow up and define more or less the space in which he moves. And this is one of the very last because it contains about all that I've been working on. What used to be background right into the figure, it defines its own space with some colors in the picture and as background, and it's all space definers. The colors are, and the grey is a space definer, and it becomes an animal, and so is the space also becoming part of the animal and the rider.